Welcome to Secret Society's podcast. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we confront a chilling question that has echoed across generations. Are the world's most powerful leaders all part of the same ancient bloodline? From presidents to monarchs, tech moguls to global financiers, an eerie pattern emerges. Connections that go beyond politics, nationality, or ideology. Could it be that behind the illusion of democracy and choice lies a web of shared ancestry, passed down through centuries, hidden in plain sight? And if so, who really holds the keys to power, and why has this truth been buried for so long? In the ancient world, blood was more than biology. It was destiny. Power was inherited, not earned. Pharaohs, emperors, and kings ruled not because they were chosen by the people, but because they were born into sacred lineages said to descend from the gods themselves. In Egypt, rulers were considered divine, their bloodlines tracing back to Osiris or Ra. In Mesopotamia, kings claimed descent from Anu, Enlil, or other celestial beings recorded in the Sumerian tablets. This belief was not symbolic, it formed the foundation of political legitimacy. Divine blood meant divine right. To question the lineage was to question the gods. As these empires rose and fell, the belief in sacred bloodlines didn't disappear. It migrated. In medieval Europe, the concept of royal blood continued, bolstered by the doctrine of the divine right of kings. Monarchs claimed their authority came from God, and genealogies were meticulously maintained to prove a continuous, uncontaminated line. Marriages between royal families weren't romantic. They were strategic, designed to preserve the purity of bloodlines and consolidate control. Dynasties like the Habsburgs, who ruled vast swaths of Europe for centuries, practiced intermarriage so aggressively that by the 17th century their family tree resembled a closed loop. But beyond these overt power structures, hidden societies and orders were forming. Organizations like the Merovingians in France, believed by some to descend from a sacred bloodline tied to early biblical figures, or even Jesus himself. This controversial claim, later popularized by speculative works and fiction, has been traced to documents like the Dossier's Secrets and the Priory of Sion hoax. Still, the idea persists that a holy bloodline was preserved, protected, and passed down through secret channels, hidden from public view, but operating beneath the surface of world events. In more recent centuries, something stranger begins to appear. Connections between world leaders who, on the surface, should have no relation. Genealogical studies, both academic and independent, have revealed distant but traceable ties between US presidents, European monarchs, and aristocratic families. A 2012 report from a young student researcher, later expanded by genealogy experts, found that 43 of 45 US presidents share a common ancestor, King John of England, the very monarch who signed the Magna Carta in 1215. While some claim this is simply the result of shared European heritage, others argue it's the product of deliberate selection, power remaining in the hands of a few families who never truly relinquished control. These lineages aren't limited to politics. Prominent tech CEOs, entertainment moguls, and banking elites also share ties, either by blood or by marriage, to old aristocratic families. Many of these relationships are buried beneath layers of complexity, maiden names, remarriages, or altered public records. But when mapped carefully, the web begins to take shape. A closed circle of influence stretching back centuries, bound not by ideology or geography, but by ancestry. The notion that such bloodlines persist and guide modern power is not merely a matter of historical curiosity. It carries profound implications. If the people presented as choices are all connected, then what is democracy but a controlled illusion? If the power to shape the future resides with those tethered to a hidden past, then the present becomes less a matter of progress and more a continuation of an ancient design. In 1999, British author Lawrence Gardner released a provocative work titled Bloodline of the Holy Grail, claiming that a hidden lineage descended from Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene had been preserved across centuries through European nobility. While many dismissed the book as speculative theology, it drew from older traditions, apocryphal texts, and whispered traditions long circulated within certain Masonic and Gnostic circles. The claim wasn't simply about religion, it was about control. If this bloodline existed, it meant that a specific group had been guarding not only spiritual authority, but a potential right to rule, stretching back over 2,000 years. Gardner wasn't alone. Researchers like Fritz Springmeier, who authored Bloodlines of the Illuminati, alleged that 13 ruling families control global finance, media, and politics. These families, according to the theory, include names like Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Windsor. What's notable isn't just the power these families hold, it's the documented intermarriage among them. Business mergers become family mergers. Strategic political alliances become arranged unions. Over generations, influence compounds and bloodlines tighten. In the United States, genealogy researchers have traced George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and even Donald Trump to European nobility, with varying degrees of separation. Hillary Clinton and Angelina Jolie were revealed to share a common ancestor. These revelations, often played for novelty in media, are rarely explored for what they could imply: that the world stage is not populated by self-made individuals, but by the descendants of a tightly controlled ancestral hierarchy. In systems that present themselves as open and merit-based, these hidden connections suggest otherwise. The British royal family, long seen as a relic of past authority, is frequently cited in these discussions. Their bloodline has been carefully preserved through centuries of intermarriage with other European monarchies. What's less well known is how often these royal lines intersect with financial dynasties and American political families. The House of Windsor, for example, has documented ties to the banking elite of Germany and aristocratic families in Austria, Italy, and France. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, has distant but verifiable blood relations to Vlad the Impaler. Yes, the historical figure who inspired Dracula. Though seemingly irrelevant, this detail is often cited by those who believe symbolic bloodlines are carefully curated, even mythologized, to preserve specific archetypes or spiritual legacies. Even stranger are reports of blood testing among elite families, quietly ensuring genetic continuity. In the early 2000s, rumors surfaced of private labs used by powerful dynasties to monitor hereditary traits, with speculation that certain blood types, particularly Rh negative, are more prevalent among global elites than in the general population. While no mainstream studies have confirmed a causal relationship between blood type and influence, the prevalence of Rh negative blood among royal lineages and ancient rulers has become a key point in alternative research circles. These pieces form a troubling mosaic. The repetition of surnames in high office, the interconnectivity of elite families, and the rituals surrounding marriage, inheritance, and birth among the world's most powerful people suggest that something older than democracy, and more methodical than chance, governs who rises and who rules. It's not just wealth that's inherited, it's placement, it's access, and perhaps most disturbingly, its identity. Certain symbols appear repeatedly in the architecture, art, and ceremonial traditions of elite families and ruling institutions, symbols that hint at a hidden language, one understood only by those within the lineage. The double-headed eagle, found in both Masonic regalia and the crests of ancient empires, represents dual power, spiritual and temporal, east and west, above and below. The Ouroboros, an ancient image of a serpent eating its tail, suggests eternal return, the cyclical preservation of power. And the checkerboard floor, used in royal palaces and Masonic lodges, signifies duality and hidden order. When mapped across time and geography, these emblems appear in surprising places. The Rothschild family crest contains 5 arrows, symbolizing their 5 founding brothers who spread out across Europe, forming the roots of a financial empire that would finance wars, influence governments, and help shape the modern banking system. Each brother married within tightly controlled circles, often cousins, ensuring wealth and blood stayed within the line. One of the most compelling breadcrumbs lies in the ritualistic behavior of the elite. Royal weddings are globally televised spectacles, but their ceremonial elements remain deeply symbolic. The choice of churches, colours, and vows often includes ancient rites with roots in Druidic, Egyptian, or Gnostic traditions. These rituals are not merely tradition. They are, to some researchers, reaffirmations of lineage. Bloodlines are not just traced by documents, but publicly confirmed through rites and oaths disguised as pageantry. In the United States, the presidential oath of office has no prescribed Bible, yet many presidents have used specific editions tied to past leaders, Masonic texts or family-owned Bibles steeped in generational history. George Washington, himself a Freemason, laid the groundwork for a pattern. Future presidents were sworn in with gestures and language that echo Masonic ritual. The Capitol building and its layout, filled with astrological alignments and esoteric geometry, have long fueled speculation that power in America was founded not only on democratic ideals, but on carefully orchestrated symbology tied to ancient knowledge. The Vatican, perhaps the most enduring institution on earth, presents another layer of symbolism cloaked in theology. Popes wear mitres resembling the fish-headed headdresses of the ancient Sumerian god Dagon. Obelisks from Egypt stand in the centre of St. Peter's Square. Bloodline theories argue that these design choices are not coincidental, but declarative, signals of continuity between ancient priesthoods and modern religious power. Another layer appears in the realm of private institutions. Secretive gatherings like those at Bohemian Grove, the Trilateral Commission, and the World Economic Forum are often dismissed as networking events. But repeated attendees, ancestral links between participants, and ceremonial elements hidden behind closed doors have led some to believe these meetings are modern expressions of ancient assemblies, rituals of bloodline maintenance disguised as policy discussions. The evidence is not found in confessions or exposed documents, but in the patterns, recurring names, repeated symbols, and mirrored behavior across centuries and continents. It suggests an encoded reality, one in which ancient bloodlines not only survive but thrive, guiding the course of human civilization under the guise of coincidence. These families do not simply wield influence, they broadcast it, encrypted in the architecture of power. Across civilizations and eras, structures of power have risen and fallen, but the underlying architecture often remains unchanged. While the names may differ, the methods are eerily consistent: strategic marriages, consolidated wealth, secret councils, and strict adherence to hierarchy. These patterns suggest more than a convergence of strategy. They point to a blueprint, a replicable model passed down through centuries, sustained by bloodline continuity and cultural inheritance. What appears on the surface as parallel evolution may, in fact, be the unfolding of a continuous, intergenerational design. In the ancient world, the pharaohs of Egypt maintained their bloodlines through sibling marriage, believing that divinity could only be preserved by keeping royal blood pure. The same logic governed the Inca Empire, where rulers often married sisters to maintain their divine lineage. Centuries later, European monarchies followed suit, not always through such extremes, but through tightly controlled alliances. The Habsburg dynasty is one of the most well-documented cases of this practice, with centuries of intermarriage leading to genetic disorders so severe they contributed to the dynasty's decline. Yet even as their reign crumbled, the blueprint survived. That blueprint is visible in today's global aristocracy. Tracing the lineage of Western banking dynasties reveals deliberate intermarriage between the Rothschilds, Warburgs, and Schiffs. These unions were not romantic, they were corporate mergers with human assets. Titles, land, and banking charters were passed like currency through family lines. And beyond money, these alliances protected knowledge, trade secrets, political strategies, and even occult practices that may have originated in Babylonian, Egyptian, or Gnostic schools. Preserved in family libraries, private temples, and invitation-only societies, this information was not for the masses. It was reserved for the bloodline. Modern secret societies, such as Skull and Bones or the Bilderberg Group, are often populated by individuals tied through ancestry, elite schooling, or both. Their exclusivity isn't merely academic, it is generational. The same surnames reappear decade after decade, generation after generation. Membership ensures not just influence, but continuity. In many ways, these groups operate like modern mystery schools, training the next generation not only in governance or finance, but in the philosophies and symbols of a hidden tradition. The continuity extends into corporate power. The CEOs of multinational conglomerates, though not royalty in name, often descend from industrialist families who have wielded influence since the 19th century. These leaders are frequently educated at the same institutions, attend the same elite clubs, and marry within the same tight social circles. Their offspring are groomed from birth, sent to specific schools, taught unspoken rules, and positioned to inherit control not just of companies, but of narratives. Media empires show the same patterns. From the Hearsts to the Murdochs, family dynasties have dominated the information landscape for generations. With control over what billions see and hear each day, these bloodlines do more than distribute content, they shape reality. The same applies to legacy political families like the Kennedys, Bushes, and Rockefellers, who have maintained influence across multiple generations, spanning domestic and foreign policy, intelligence, and infrastructure. The deeper one looks, the clearer the echoes become. Power, when preserved through blood, becomes a self-replicating organism. It doesn't need to conquer, it simply endures. What may appear as separate empires, ideologies, or eras is, under this lens, a singular structure, a global lattice of inherited authority that continues to operate under layers of visibility, shielding the enduring legacy of the ancient bloodlines that may never have relinquished the throne. Within the halls of academia and the pages of mainstream history, the notion of ancient bloodlines controlling modern global power is routinely dismissed. Scholars insist that these genealogical connections are either coincidental or irrelevant, citing the vast scale of global population and the statistical likelihood of distant ancestry among public figures. Genealogy, they argue, becomes less meaningful as the degrees of separation increase. Yet the consistency with which these names reappear, not just in lineage, but in high-ranking positions of influence, defies easy explanation. And when patterns emerge that threaten dominant narratives, institutions often respond not with inquiry, but with silence, ridicule, or redirection. Universities, long thought to be bastions of free thought, are deeply intertwined with the very elites whose ancestry is under question. Ivy League institutions like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton have produced presidents, Supreme Court justices, intelligence directors, and central bankers. These universities were founded, funded, and governed by the same families whose bloodlines appear in the genealogies of power. Skull and Bones at Yale, for example, is a private society whose members have gone on to shape US foreign policy, lead intelligence agencies, and occupy the Oval Office. Yet their rituals, membership rosters, and internal writings remain sealed from public view. Historians are trained to dismiss such continuities as speculative or conspiratorial. To explore them seriously would require acknowledging that historical progress may not be as democratic, chaotic, or meritocratic as previously thought. It would suggest that power is not a rotating door of opportunity, but a carefully guarded corridor with access granted only to those with the right heritage. And if such an idea gained traction, it would erode the very foundation of modern liberal democracy, a system that depends on the belief in equal opportunity and open access to influence. Media outlets, likewise, show little interest in investigating these bloodlines. Journalists who attempt to trace connections between modern elites and historical dynasties are often dismissed as fringe. Editors fear being associated with conspiratorial thinking, or worse, losing access to sources and institutions essential for their reporting. Stories about global summits, political dynasties, and elite philanthropy are framed through sanitized lenses, reducing generational wealth and lineage to background trivia, never systemic control. Search engines and social platforms amplify this filtering effect. Algorithms prioritize content that aligns with mainstream narratives, while demoting or outright removing material that questions genealogical power structures. Under the guise of combating misinformation, real investigation is stifled. The digital gatekeepers have become the new arbiters of legitimacy, able to erase inquiries with a keystroke and flood attention away from inconvenient truths. Even when bloodline connections are publicly acknowledged, they are treated as harmless curiosities. Presidential cousins are laughed off as quirks. Royal ties among celebrities are seen as charming coincidences. Yet this casual treatment masks a deeper issue. If these relationships were random, they wouldn't consistently lead to concentrated power. The mockery becomes a shield, protecting the structure from scrutiny. By dismissing, ignoring, or ridiculing the concept of bloodline continuity, Modern institutions reinforce a curated version of history, one where power is earned, not inherited, and where every child truly has an equal chance. To question this is to confront the possibility that history, as it is taught, may serve the very bloodlines it claims no longer exist. Among the most controversial and fiercely debated ideas surrounding ancient bloodlines is the suggestion that these families are not merely preserving power through inheritance, but guarding something far older, perhaps even otherworldly. Fringe theorists have long speculated that elite bloodlines may not be entirely human in origin. These theories, often dismissed outright by mainstream voices, propose that certain ruling families possess genetic traits inherited from ancient beings, gods, hybrids, or extraterrestrials, whose influence predates recorded history. The idea is not new. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki, sky beings who descended to Earth and intervened in human evolution. These beings were described not only as powerful but as genetically distinct, often interbreeding with humans to create demigods or hybrid rulers. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the Book of Enoch, and in the mythologies of Egypt, India, and Mesoamerica, similar narratives emerge. Divine or celestial bloodlines establishing rule over mankind, then receding into myth. But what if they never left? What if their blood still flows in the veins of those who rule today? One recurring element in this theory is the Rh-negative blood type. While the majority of the global population is Rh-positive, a small percentage, less than 15%, possess Rh-negative blood, which lacks the rhesus factor protein found in most humans. This anomaly has sparked speculation about a separate genetic origin. Rh-negative individuals are statistically overrepresented in royal and aristocratic lineages throughout Europe. The theory suggests that this blood type may signify a link to non-terrestrial ancestry or ancient advanced civilizations. While mainstream science attributes Rh-negative blood to simple genetic variation, others view it as a marker, one that has been quietly tracked and preserved through selective breeding and generational unions. Another controversial concept is the notion of divine right, as more than a metaphor. In this view, the idea that monarchs rule by divine authority was not symbolic but literal, a recognition that their bloodline carried a unique essence, a connection to knowledge or dimensions hidden from the general population. This theory ties into esoteric traditions and secret societies that revere sacred geometry, frequency, and the manipulation of energy. According to this belief, ancient bloodlines may have retained access to arcane techniques lost to the modern world, methods for activating higher consciousness, harnessing natural forces, or even extending lifespan. These abilities, it is said, are safeguarded through ritual, taught in private, and never shared with the masses. There are also stories, rare, fragmented, and often unverifiable, of secretive eugenics programs operating behind the veil of science, aimed at preserving or enhancing particular genetic lines. These programs are rumored to involve isolated communities, clandestine reproductive experiments, and long-term tracking of individuals born into specific families. Such claims are difficult to prove, but their persistence across decades, whispered in the same circles that discuss breakaway civilizations and black-budget projects, adds to their mystique. These theories, while radical, gain traction not because they are proven, but because they fill gaps left by official explanations. Why do certain families appear immune to scandal, war, and economic collapse? Why do they reappear across centuries, unchanged in their influence? And why is there such intense resistance to investigating their origins? Whether symbolic or literal, the bloodline narrative has become a lens through which many view history, not as a sequence of chance events, but as a hidden continuum shaped by forces outside public understanding. Throughout history, the manipulation of knowledge has often run parallel to the preservation of power. When bloodlines are the vessels of authority, the control of history becomes a survival strategy. Libraries burn, archives vanish, and inconvenient truths are buried beneath official narratives. Those who seek to expose the connections between ruling families and ancient legacies often meet with discredit, disgrace, or silence. The deeper the investigation, the more elusive the evidence becomes, not because it doesn't exist, but because it's been deliberately erased, hidden, or rewritten by the very hands that crafted the history books. Consider the disappearance of genealogical records in times of war. During the World Wars, countless archives were destroyed, not by accident but through targeted bombings and looting campaigns. In Nazi Germany, the regime maintained exhaustive lineage records to determine racial purity, yet many of those documents vanished after the war. Some were smuggled into private hands, others were seized and sealed by intelligence agencies. In the aftermath, critical links between aristocratic European families and transatlantic power brokers were lost, or perhaps hidden. In the Soviet Union, the aristocracy was dismantled, but not entirely erased. Many noble families fled, changed names, or integrated into new elite circles under false identities. Their bloodlines, however, continued. In the chaos of revolution, connections were obscured, not severed. The same pattern appeared in China, where the Communist Party ostensibly abolished feudal systems, yet new dynasties of power emerged, often with shadowy links to pre-revolutionary families and secret societies embedded in the bureaucracy. Western nations have their own history of quiet purges. The JFK assassination files remain partially redacted to this day, despite decades of public pressure. Among the withheld documents are rumoured references to intelligence assets embedded within elite families and private foundations, names that never make the news, but move through banking, diplomacy and defence with remarkable consistency. The official reason for withholding these files is national security. Yet many believe the true danger lies in revealing the interconnected nature of government, finance and bloodline legacy. Educational curriculums reinforce this erasure. Students are taught to view history through dates, wars and policies, not dynasties, alliances or inheritances. The lives of kings and queens are treated as trivia, disconnected from modern politics. Rarely is it acknowledged that many of today's politicians, bankers and industrialists are direct descendants of those same monarchs. The myth of meritocracy depends on the illusion that anyone can rise, that power is fluid. But when genealogy is examined, the fluidity disappears. What remains is a closed circuit. Control of publishing and media ensures that even the most rigorous genealogical investigations rarely reach a wide audience. Independent researchers are labelled conspiracy theorists, no matter how carefully sourced their work. Films and television occasionally touch on these themes, but only as fiction, never as fact. When a narrative threatens the foundation of perceived reality, it is not debated. It is erased. This deliberate forgetting creates a vacuum, one filled with official stories that elevate democracy, randomness and progress, while denying the continuity of power through blood. Yet despite the suppression, fragments remain. Family crests carved in cathedrals, Masonic symbols etched into cornerstones, and bloodlines whispered about behind closed doors. The past wasn't lost, it was hidden. And those who hid it knew exactly what they were protecting. If even a portion of the bloodline theories hold truth, the implications for modern society are nothing short of seismic. The story we've been told, that power is won through talent, elections, innovation or charisma, would collapse under the weight of a different, darker narrative. It would mean that across centuries and continents, a hidden aristocracy has shaped the course of human history, not through conquest or revolution, but through inheritance. Their influence isn't temporary, and their control isn't limited to individual nations. It's systemic, global, and intergenerational. Democracy, as it is widely understood, begins to look more like theatre. Candidates are chosen, elections are held, and debates are broadcast. But behind the scenes, bloodlines converge. The names change, but the networks remain. Politicians are educated at the same elite institutions, funded by the same legacy donors, and advised by the same think tanks. When they rise, it's often because doors were opened, not by public will, but by ancestral privilege. If these doors are guarded by blood, then the promise of representation becomes hollow. Capitalism, too, shifts in meaning. The myth of the self-made billionaire is celebrated endlessly, yet many of the most powerful financial dynasties today were established generations ago. These families operate not as businesses, but as dynastic empires, discreetly owning entire sectors of industry, manipulating markets and influencing monetary policy. Their intermarriage cements control across borders. Wealth isn't just accumulated, it's weaponized. directed like a tool to shape governments, crush dissent, and dictate the boundaries of innovation. Religion is not exempt. If bloodlines are traced back to figures considered divine, like the Merovingians or descendants of biblical patriarchs, then modern religious institutions may be serving purposes beyond salvation. The preservation of these lineages within churches, temples, and secretive orders suggests a custodianship of knowledge that is not shared with the masses. Rituals and symbolism become mechanisms of continuity, ways to affirm ancestral identity while concealing it behind spiritual doctrine. In this context, education becomes indoctrination. History is taught in fragments, disconnected from genealogy or continuity. Children are taught to see change as progress, unaware that the same families have controlled the narrative across every supposed revolution. The erasure of bloodline influence from textbooks is not an oversight. It is the very foundation of modern myth-making. Technology, often viewed as a democratizing force, may in fact be the most powerful tool of control yet devised. Surveillance systems, biometric data, and algorithmic profiling can now track individuals across generations. If bloodlines are being monitored, and if those in power have access to genetic information on a planetary scale, then the future may not be about equality, but about genetic stratification. The elite wouldn't need to rule through laws or guns. They could rule through data, mapping bloodlines in real time and eliminating threats before they emerge. If this is true, then the world we live in is not free, and it never was. It is a carefully managed ecosystem designed to appear chaotic while remaining under control. The implications touch every aspect of life: politics, economy, faith, education, and personal identity. It's not simply that history has been manipulated, it's that the very concept of freedom has been reframed, defined by boundaries invisible to those outside the lineage but deeply understood by those within. The story of ancient bloodlines is not just a tale of kings and queens, of castles and crowns. It is a story that cuts to the core of what it means to be human in a world governed by unseen forces. If power is truly preserved through heredity, not merit, then the illusion of choice becomes the greatest deception of all. Generations have lived and died under the belief that progress is linear, that freedom is expanding, and that history is written by the will of the people. But beneath that narrative lies another, one in which decisions are made by those whose names the public never hears, whose ancestry stretches back before the rise of modern nations, and whose power is measured not in headlines, but in heritage. The persistence of these bloodlines across time is not simply a matter of wealth or influence. It is a cultural and metaphysical inheritance. Through ritual, secrecy, and the strategic manipulation of history, these families have retained a grip on civilization's trajectory that is both elegant and invisible. They do not need to announce their rule. Their fingerprints are already etched into the architecture of every capital, the crests of global institutions, and the coded language of law, finance, and religion. The silence surrounding them is not evidence of absence. It is the ultimate sign of control. What makes this possibility so difficult to accept is how effectively it has been hidden in plain sight. The symbols we see on currency, the traditions we watch during coronations, the connections between political dynasties, all are dismissed as coincidence or ceremony. But if these elements are seen instead as continuity, threads in a larger, deliberate tapestry, then the picture begins to shift. History ceases to be a record of human struggle and becomes instead a controlled script handed down by those who claim ancient right. This realization is deeply unsettling. It suggests that wars, elections, revolutions, and even cultural movements may be, in part, orchestrated events designed to reinforce the illusion of progress while maintaining the same underlying structure. The narrative of human freedom may itself be a creation, one built not to liberate, but to pacify. If ancient bloodlines are indeed the silent directors of this story, then every societal pillar we take for granted, justice, equality, meritocracy, must be re-examined not as goals but as distractions. And yet acknowledging this possibility does not mean surrender. It means clarity. The first step toward real freedom is recognizing the boundaries that have been placed around it. To question who holds power is not paranoia, it is responsibility. Because only when the illusion is shattered can a new story begin, one not written by blood, but by truth. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Secret Society's podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to Secret Society's podcast on Spotify. Subscribe now.